Right, welcome back to the Jack Water Football Podcast. The opening day is upon us, the opening weekend in Sky Bet League One. I'm so excited. It's time we break down all of the action. If you're new to these roundups, every single Sunday, we break down 4 selected games in real detail, then go around the grounds, analyse, tear them apart, discuss all of the big hot topics in the division. And we start with a bang. The opening day did not disappoint. Get involved in the comment section down below, replying and responding to all of those as per usual. Make it a discussion, make it a conversation. I look forward to going through those and hearing your points of view. How are you feeling after the opening day? Remember, it is just the start. So much can change. Of course, if you're new and you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do that. It's free to do so. Hit that subscribe button and leave a like as well. Let's get straight into it. Beginning with the first game, Cambridge United against Oxford United. So, in the first game, it finishes Cambridge 2, Oxford 0. The XG for the match is 0.53 to 0.66. It's the hope and optimism that kills you, isn't it? That's what it feels like if you are an Oxford fan this morning, waking up on this Sunday, and I imagine all of the other supporters that lost in the opening weekend. Can we hit the restart button? Look, all jokes aside, the opening day is not defining. It shouldn't define you and it won't define your season. It's frustrating because that hope and optimism that you really build yourself up for is shattered. In some sense, it is shattered and it is frustrated because you do really look forward to this. I mean, we've been looking forward to this for about 13 weeks. Everybody does going into the first game of the season, and when it doesn't go your way and you don't put in a great performance and the result isn't ideal, like that, if you're an Oxford fan, fantastic for Cambridge, and we'll come on to that. Look, there's real talking points. Let's break it down. Fair play to Cambridge, that's really important. They made the game really compact, and they made the pitch feel really small, extremely clinical, and defended perfectly. And I think if Cambridge were going to be a nuisance, that was how they were going to beat Oxford. It was going to be very, very compact, defensively really strong, defend from deep. If they're going to score early, that's fantastic. They scored 2 fairly early goals in that first half, defended, and then for the rest of the game, brilliantly, and made it very difficult in that low block. And like I said, if Cambridge were going to win this game, that's how they were going to do it, most likely. Painful flashbacks from last season for Oxford. A lack of real quality in all thirds, especially in that final third. And I don't want it to be deja vu, but it does feel a little bit like deja vu. It's like the season never ended. Last season, that is. And that is not nice. So let's move over to SofaScore. This graph here visualises the attacking moments across the match. Cambridge, the home side, in green. Oxford, the away side, in blue. Clearly, more blue than green. And Oxford were on top. But as the XG does suggest of 0.66, there was no end product or output. And that's the familiar story of last season. The concerning familiar story of last season. No end product. No finishing of the dinner. And you can have all of the ball. We'll come on to the stats in just a second. Comfortable in possession, plenty of passes, but with an XG of 0.66, that's not good enough. You're not creating clear-cut chances. There's no firepower in that side once again. And that is the deja vu that we're speaking about. That's the annoyance and the creepy frustrations of last season back in there. Cambridge, fantastic. The spikes there, fairly small in that first half, where they had the majority, first 20, 30 minutes, I thought they were really, really good, and they just caught us off guard, and they took their chances. And like I said at the beginning, Cambridge, they take those early chances, or those fairly early chances in the game, and then defend fantastically well and soak up the pressure, play that low block. Even with that pressure that you can see visualised on the graph here, they're fine in doing that. They can do that. And again, the spikes didn't have to be big when they did score, Cambridge, because they came from mistakes. They came from frustrating errors. Kieran Brown losing it on the left, on the right, in for the second goal. A good passage of play, you'd say, and then a ball into the penalty area, not defended well, and Ahmed nods it in. He was fantastic, by the way. The quite target man, physical striker, the focal point of that Cambridge side. We'll come on to him later. But that's how they came about. They didn't have to be sort of large, dominant spells from Cambridge. Oxford did that, but they took their chances, and that's clinical, and that's the difference. Let's move over to the stats here, because it does further frustrate Oxford fans like myself. You can see 70% possession. That's the way that Liam Manning wants to play. Having the ball, plenty of possession. Similar, you'd say, to how Carl Robinson wanted it. And to compare the two does make me feel slightly uneasy and quite frustrated. I use that word again. But plenty of the ball. Passes, I can tell you, 672 passes. And again, I come back to expected goals and the chances that were created. I think it does actually say the number of chances. One big chance there. I'd probably argue, one big chance would be the one in the second half from Stanley Mills. Some good saves from Jack Stevens, the ex-goalkeeper, of course, now the Cambridge number 1. Made a good save for Brannigan in that first half. And then Brannigan actually had a really good opportunity, you'd say. A good strike, nearly went in the top corner. I was pretty convinced it was going into the top corner. It skies over in that second half. And you thought that maybe if we did get that one goal, that moment of magic from the likes of Brannigan, that switches the game. Cambridge feel the pressure, and then we can sort of go at them in a different way, psychologically maybe. But that didn't happen, and we didn't get that goal. And, you know, the more it went on at 2-0, Cambridge felt more confident, and Oxford sort of just looked shorter of ideas, you'd say. 3 shots on target from a total of 10 isn't good enough. It's not a good enough ratio. And again, a very scary, familiar story. Plenty of the ball, but the lack of urgency in possession. I thought we were really, really slow in terms of 2, 3, 4, 5 touches in possession, when actually you've got to be quick against this type of side. You've got to be patient, but you've got to do it with pace. And Cambridge knew that if we were going to just have the ball and sit with it, they were comfortable having it with McEachran in that deeper role. Brannigan, 2, 3 touches, back to McEachran, try and get it out to Kieran Brown. He can't take the man on, tries to go to the winger, intercepted, back we go. It was very, very frustrating, sideways and backwards, and that was the frustration in the away end where I was, and the Oxford fans that were not happy about that. And again, it's that balance between trying to be patient in breaking down a low block, but also not being very proactive. And we weren't being proactive, and we weren't very adventurous whatsoever in the way that we're trying to create against this Cambridge side. Only 269 passes of those were in the Cambridge half. Way too passive, and that's the word I come back to. Lack of urgency, very passive, not very adventurous. So let's touch on the average positions. Once again, breaking down that low block was the problem for Oxford, and a robust, well-organised opposition left us very short of creative ideas. You can see, looking at the positional sense of the players, everybody is in the position where you'd probably expect them to be. You'd like maybe to see Mark Harris, our number 9, higher than he is. He dropped deep to try and get the ball, but that's the type of player he is. He wants to press, he wants to drop deep to find the ball and link up play. I don't mind that. Didn't really work. Better in the first half, second half, when we were chasing the game, it just didn't work. Again, not a nice reading when you look at the shot map either. We'll scroll down here to the shot map. We'll start off with the Oxford's shot map. The inability to break down the low block and Cambridge just on a general basis is shown here. 2 shots inside the penalty area. I can tell you, 2 efforts from inside the box, both of them headers. One from Stanley Mills, one from Elliot Moore across the entire game. Now, that isn't good enough. You can't have 2 shots on goal being 2 headers. Stanley Mills, great save from Jack Stevens, and he should do better, but I don't think he could do too much more. It's just a very good save, and one of those where you go, maybe it just isn't our day. It felt like that. But having said all of that, you've got to have more opportunities in the penalty area. You've got to have more in the box, and we couldn't, because we couldn't break them down. We couldn't get into the area. Cambridge defended their box so well, and we knew that was going to be the case. We knew Cambridge were going to play that low block well. We couldn't deal with it. I think, to summarise, the only way is up for Oxford. That's how it feels. I'm already itching for the next game. I want to see an improvement. I don't want this trend to continue, because if it does continue, we're already comparing us to last season, and that isn't nice. There were lots of glimpses of last season. There was improvements in certain areas, but on sort of a general basis, it is the opening game. It's only one match, and we've got to go again against Carlisle, but it's not nice, and it wasn't a great showing. Like I say, Cambridge United, fantastic in the way they executed their game plan, fantastic from Mark Bonner. Everybody knows how I feel about Mark Bonner. Congratulations to him, a great first game for him. Got to put things right against Carlisle, Oxford. Cambridge got to continue it, because I got them in 24th. Rule number 1, never put your opening day opposition in 24th. That's what we've learned from the opening day in this game. So next up, we have Barnsley 7, Port Vale 0. 7-0. The XG 2.29 to 0.58. Barnsley with less shots absolutely smashed Port Vale 7 goals to 0. There's being effective in the wide areas, and there's Barnsley. 4 goals from balls into the penalty area. It turns out Barnsley, there is nothing to worry about, it seems. So let's take a look at the graph on SofaScore. Very, very bizarre. The side with less attacking spikes won 7-0. Only in football, only in Sky Bet League 1. It concludes some very key facts. First and foremost, Barnsley were very, very clinical, utterly clinical in front of goal. Port Vale were defensively woeful. Barnsley scored from moments which had very limited build-up play, balls into the box, very direct, absolutely. Port Vale were the centre of their own downfall. All of those very, very true and visualised with this graph in front of you. Straight to the stats as well, further strengthens that argument. 50% possession each, but as mentioned earlier, Barnsley had less shots than Port Vale, 13 to 12, only by one, but even still, 12 shots to 13, one side wins 7-0, scores 7 goals, the other with none. It is just bizarre. Barnsley scored from 7 of their 8 shots on target, whilst Devante Cole, their striker, converted from every one of his shots on target. 3 from 3. The perfect opening day hat-trick from Devante Cole. We'll come on to him later with some more stats on him. But again, incredible from that striker and fantastic ratio from 3 goals to 3 when it comes to shots on goal to shots into the back of the net. Perfection. Port Vale defenders. Let's move over to this lineup here. Lewis Cass on the right hand side, number 2, and Daniel Jones on the left hand side of this back 3. We'll come on to the average positions in just a second. Equally strange, but we'll touch on that in due course. Those 2 players in that back 3. Jules won, or should I say Jules lost. Lewis Cass and Daniel Jones won 3 from 13 combined aerial duels. Talk about being bullied in the air. Whilst Cass failed to win a single duel both in the air and on the ground through the entire game. You can see the 5.2 rating. Sometimes Sofa score are slightly harsh or maybe a little bit generous on certain players. 9.6 for Cole, probably should be a 10. Lewis Cass 5, probably should be a 3. Probably a 2, because the fact that the defender doesn't win a single one of his duels, both in the air and on the ground, is simply unacceptable. And a big reason why they were just bullied in the penalty area. Port Vale made it so easy to be punished in their own penalty area. They were pitiful up the other end too. I know we talk about conceding 7. Going forward, equally rubbish. Equally a nightmare. Open play XG of 0.25 with more shots than your opposition when you lose 7-0 alongside that. 6 on target is a massive concern. A huge concern for Andy Crosby. Again, I come down to the stats here. More corners, more shots off target, more block shots. I think they needed a striker going into the game. That was the conversation. I think yesterday was enough proof to say that they need some more firepower. And of course, not conceding 7 is a good place to start. When you do concede 7, you're making it difficult for those centre-forwards to salvage much from games. But that striker was on the agenda for Port Vale. I kept them up in my predictions because I thought their general recruitment has been good. They were lacking firepower. You can't concede 7. You really can't, no matter who you bring in. But they do need to be better in their output, and they can't be so easily brushed aside in their own penalty area. Because if you go back and watch those goals they conceded, a lot of them are duels, headers, and just very easy passages of play that Barnsley did fantastically well at converting. It's a huge problem. I also want to draw your attention to the average positions. Massively frightening. If you are a Port Vale fan in particular, the back line, the space between defenders is frightening. Number 6, Nathan Smith, the captain, the central defender. Cass on the right, on the left, Daniel Jones. Look at the space between those 2 players. It is frightening how much space there is between those 2, alongside the crazily high fullbacks of Connor Grant and Mitchell Clark on the right. You can see why it was so easy for Barnsley to pop them off and to just get at them and to bully the penalty area and to make it, the Port Vale penalty area, a Barnsley playground. They were so easily got at, and with the gaps and space like that, very, very clear. When defenders are left so exposed, it's no surprise they will dominate the penalty area. All 7 goals that Barnsley scored were inside that penalty area, and it's not surprising whatsoever. When you are in possession, you can have bigger gaps. When you lose 7-0 and you play like that, you can't have gaps. And when you have players like Devante Cole up top, who were on that type of form, having players exposed in those areas is just a recipe for disaster. No surprise when looking at the shape this went so horribly wrong, and the fact they didn't adjust either is equally just as bad. Of course, it was only 2-0 at half time, so the 5 goals in the second half they didn't help, did they? They didn't help, but it's very, very clear something didn't go right whatsoever. Everything went wrong, you'd say, defensively, and that's something that Andy Crosby has got to improve at, organising a back line, because if it continues like that, they're going to ship so many goals. Let's take a look at Devante Cole, because he deserves a lot of praise, and he'll get a lot of praise from myself because he was absolutely brilliant. You can see actually his heat map, not in lots of areas for a long time. Quite a few areas, but there's not very deep, dark heat maps there whatsoever. Very, very spread out, you'd say, and he was just fantastic. 3 goals from 3 shots on target. 3 goals from an XG of 1.38, full of physicality and penalty box presence. Won 3 of his 4 aerial duels, so not just good on the ground either. He scored a couple of headers in there as well, so you can see fantastic in the air. He won those duels. Dispossessed, literally none. 0 times. The perfect striker performance. Devante Cole was fantastic. Definitely my player of the week across all of the games. He was the difference in this one by some way and made it impossible for Port Vale to get back into this game because he just kept going and kept causing issues. I think Barnsley, they were worried about the lack of striking options. Devante Cole, maybe he's proven that he can step up and be that top goal scorer. You do need to get out of League One. He was incredible yesterday. Final point, Barnsley, the perfect start. 7 goals to 0 in the opening day is just incredible. Silencing those pre-season doubters, some will say myself. Look, I thought they would struggle. I thought they would struggle across the season. They still might do. I think it's important to say, look, this isn't time to start engraving the trophy now with the name Barnsley. But I would say it's very, very encouraging. And it does shut up quite a few early doubters. As for Port Vale, back to the drawing board. And that's polite. I think that's quite a polite way of putting it. It was utterly abysmal. They need to improve because if they play like that and defend like that in particular, and also you'd say attack like that, all thirds in that manner, they're going to be in a lot of trouble this season. I think they will improve. Talk about a wake-up call. We were speaking about a wake-up call with Oxford losing 2-0. 7-0, but in the end it finishes Barnsley 7, Port Vale 0. Next up, it finishes Bolton 3, Lincoln City 0. The XG for the match, 0.90 to 0.31. It's a statement win for Bolton as they start the season as they intend to continue it. A sharp set-piece central 3 points on the opening day shows exactly why they were in many pre-season title conversations. You can see when looking at the graph in front of you here, Bolton are the ones pulling the strings. Very, very dominant. The side on top. Lincoln, very small moments across the match. Couldn't stop that Bolton relentless pressure and that rhythm that they created. And very, very importantly, this season so far, I say, on the opening day of the season, Bolton with the output. And that's important. Last season, possession stats, dominance, tick those boxes, fine. But the output wasn't there. I know, of course, 2 were set pieces, 1 was an own goal. So maybe at the end of build-up play, the chances could have been converted slightly better and more of them could be converted. I'm sure that will come and that would have been improved over the summer. 3 goals, it's hard to argue with. However, the output's there. Goals were the issue last season for Bolton, and so far, so good. Let's move over to the stats as well, because that dominance is also reflected when looking at the stats. 70% possession, I can tell you 716 passes for Bolton as well, just the way that Everett would have wanted it. Very, very dominant, comfortable on the ball. 16 shots to 6, 0 shots on target for Lincoln. That's the problem. That is the Mark Kennedy red flag. I know they couldn't get near Bolton at times. They were fantastic. Showed exactly why they're going to be in that conversation. I think Mark Kennedy said it himself when he saw the Bolton fixture on the opening day. It was a nightmare. It's not the game you would have wanted to start the season. It's not very good at trying to ease yourself into the season. Which games can you ease yourself into? Not many, but Bolton away probably isn't one of them. If you could pick one, that isn't it. Mark Kennedy was very honest in saying that himself, but 0 shots on target isn't ideal whatsoever and doesn't give you a great chance of getting anything from the match. Again, a big concern, and we'll come on to it later. I think another frustration is that 2 of them were set pieces and they are avoidable. That's the annoyance. The other one was an own goal and 2 corners. That can be avoided. The average positions as well do show a little bit more about Lincoln's woes, I think, in that game yesterday. Very narrow. Lincoln played a very, very narrow way. They didn't press very well either. And whilst leaving very little in the wide areas, centrally as well, they did try and play most of their football. They weren't great there either. The counter of speed of Shodipo last season was really, really impressive. And when you look at sides playing like Lincoln, a little bit deeper at times, having that counter-attack pace of Shodipo is just an example. You could give it with others, but Shodipo was that main one last season. He did it very, very well and was very effective at doing it. That was the outball. That was the way of attacking a different type of way. Yesterday, they couldn't really do that. In a side in Bolton that were going to suffocate them at times, and they were going to have to defend deeply, Lincoln, and trying to hit them on the break. Not having that outball and that wide area dominance that Shodipo could take over was a big problem. Sorensen played on the right, and you can see with the average positions, he was the most advanced player out wide. And again, him playing very wide, I think it just gave Random Williams on that left-hand side a lot of freedom to attack down that flank. And again, that wasn't ideal either. They couldn't really get going. They didn't have that outball. And I'm going to say something that Bolton fans, I don't want you to get carried away with. And Ipswich fans, if you are watching this, I also think it's very important to say that this is only one game. But the way that the average positions do show Bolton and the way they attacked, suffocation football, very similar to how Kieran McKenna set up his Ipswich side last season. Very, very good at suffocating the opposition, playing high with plenty of bodies. Look how many bodies there are in the attacking area. Lots of them. Of course, I'm not comparing Ipswich to Bolton after one game. I'm definitely not doing that. But I'm saying very, very similar in the way I am comparing them, but not as an entire team and an outfit across the campaign. Just in this game and the way they attacked, very similar in the way they suffocated the opposition. Pin the opposition back at all times and look to be very fluid in recycling the attacks. So the final points on that game, Bolton, it's not time to run away with yourself. It's not, but it's very, very encouraging. The performance and the result is extremely encouraging. They do mean business this season. That is fair to say. For Lincoln, not a pretty fixture. Not a nice way to start off the season. And again, that big frustration is that 3 goals that are avoidable in some sense. 2 corners and an own goal. Annoying, and like I say, they couldn't really attack them in any way. They were very, very short of ideas going forward, but a lot of that is down to the way that Bolton were fantastic at not allowing Lincoln any chance of getting into the match. It finishes Bolton 3, Lincoln 0. Bolton, they mean business. So in the fourth game, it finishes Derby 1, Wigan 2. The XG for the match, 1.08 to 0.97. The open play XG, I'm also going to give you, is 0.79 to 0.95. More on that in just a few moments' time. If Derby forgot they needed striker reinforcements, they were definitely reminded yesterday as Wigan made them pay. Individual errors and Charlie White's familiar form in Sky Bet League 1 made the difference at Pride Park on the opening day as well. And you can see when looking at the graph in front of you, fairly equal. Derby applying slightly more pressure, you'd say, going forward. But that early scary prediction when it comes to Derby and the lack of firepower up top came to fruition in the first game of the season. James Collins and Nathaniel Mendez-Lang starting up top. It's not inspiring enough. It really isn't. James Collins, he's a striker that is very, very physical, not blessed with pace at his older age now, his career, but you'd still back him to hit and convert chances. He had a very, very good chance early on in the game that he didn't convert. Collins missing that one is not a good start to the season. And with that agenda and that headline of not having enough striker power, firepower and output, to miss that chance, you're not doing a very good job, James, of trying to shut up those doubters, are you? You're not, because that chance is got to be converted. I'll put a screenshot on the screen for you now to sort of really show where that chance is. And you look at where he is in the penalty area. He's a fox-in-the-box striker. When he hasn't got that pace anymore of maybe playing over the top, being that advanced forward, he's going to be that physical presence in the penalty box. You've got to score that chance. It gets worse. A poor back pass from Bradley gives Wyke a free one-on-one, which he does convert. Spell of dominance, suddenly you're pinned back and you're chasing the game. In the second half, things did improve for Derby and they had more dominance. They asked more questions in the attacking phase, as shown on the graph here, that sort of big bulk of green after half time. And the volley is a fantastic one, and they've equalised, and it does come from a Ward, ball into the penalty area, whipped cross. Also, Curtis Nelson does it later on in the game. Again, doesn't fall to the right player, and it's not converted. Those opportunities have got to be scored, and they just do need someone like David McGoldrick. I'm sorry I said it, and it's not nice for Derby fans to hear, but they do need another striker. They need somebody who is a natural finisher, because they've got to be more clinical. They had opportunities in the game, not as many as they would have liked, but they still had enough to win the match. And again, the individual errors were a big problem. Wigan's big moment in that second half, the only moment in that second half, proves to be the winner. Wildsmith flaps it across and Wyke hits his second. Instinctive. And that's what happens when you combine a individual error to a striker that's natural at trying to sniff out problems. And that is what Charlie Wyke does. He did it for Sunderland. He did it for Wigan last time they were in League One. It's just what he's all about. And it's a fantastic way of sniffing up the danger. And it was danger, and Wildsmith, like I say, absolutely flapped at it, and he headed it in, converted, and it's a fantastic result at Pride Park for Wigan, but it's an opening day to forget at Pride Park for Derby County. Now, at the start of this game breakdown, I gave you two separate expected goals, open play XG and general XG. The reason why I did that is because Derby had a much higher set play expected goals compared to Wigan, 0.29 to 0.02. The 11 Derby corners would have definitely helped that. Sonny Bradley had a great chance from a header in that first half before he was at mistake for the first goal. Not a great day at the office for him. He was unmarked and headed wide. A great chance, and that would have bolstered the expected goals for set plays. But also does show the quality of chances in open play. Wigan did sway Bolton, highlighting the lack of Derby firepower and creativity alongside the sloppiness in possession. That's important to say. I think Derby were sloppy in possession. They weren't good enough. As you can see as well, 21 shots, 5 on target, a big forewarned concern there. The lack of clinical edge can't be a trend this season. With 13 efforts inside the box, more than one must be finished. And actually the one that was scored was a great volley, and that one is probably the lowest XG out of any of the chances. That James Collins XG would have been the highest of the game. Strikers must be added. That's the bottom line. If you're going to take anything away from this game, Derby, it's got to be they need more firepower up top. They knew that going into the season. The first game, they've been shown it clear as day. They can't rely on James Collins to be their only goal-scoring output. That was shown in the match against Wigan as well. Of course, Wigan deserve great credit. They were fantastic at capitalising on mistakes and looked much sharper than Derby. Paul Warne said in his interview after the game, the reason why Derby lost was because his better players weren't at their best. I would agree with aspects, but I would say a lot of the time, Wigan wanted it more and were much, much better at being intelligent and hungry, especially from Wyke as an example, to sniff out the mistake in the first half and then the mistake in the second half as well. Really interesting. Final point deduction, no problem for Wigan. That's important to say. I got a lot of stick from Wigan fans, and maybe I got it totally wrong. They proved in that game yesterday. Maloney got it spot on with his team selection, their setup, and that Callum Lang and Charlie White partnership. I know Callum Lang, the skipper, didn't get a goal contribution, but I think together they complement each other very, very well. Him and Charlie White together. That could be a real dangerous strike force. They got it right, and this could be a Wigan season to remember, not just for a survival story. And again, I don't want to jump on it too much. Don't want to go against my prediction too early, the opening day, but they gave us lots of food for thought. Derby played like the side with all of the pressure on their backs, and the clear lack of edge in the final third will be frustrating with their opening day defeat. It finishes Derby County 1, Wigan 2. Let's go around the grounds. So it's time we go around the grounds for this opening day special, touching on all of the other games in Sky Bet League 1 this weekend. Shrewsbury 1, Cheltenham 0, Carlisle 1, Fleetwood 1, Northampton 0, Stevenage 1. A late goal for Stevenage, getting one up on their newly promoted rivals Northampton. Wycombe 0, Exeter 3, a bit of a surprise there for some people. Blackpool 2, Burton 0, Pompey 1, Bristol Rovers 1. A draw at Fratton Park. Charlton 1, Leyton Orient 0, a great start for Dean Holden after what's been a great summer window for Charlton, 1-0 in that game. Reading 0, Peterborough United 1, not a good start for Celeste at Reading. And there you have it, all of the games wrapped up for you in Sky Bet League 1 this afternoon. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you subscribe and leave a like and get involved in the conversation below in the comments. I'll be replying and responding to all of those as per usual. Lots of talking points. Are you happy with your opening day side's performance and result? Do let me know, and everybody reading through those, I can't wait to do so. It's great to be back. I've been Jack. This has been the Jack Ward Football Podcast. I will see you all very, very soon. Take care.